Welcome back, Idiot Squared viewers. This week, we've got a dicey episode. We're going to be discussing, did OpenAI steal the internet? Is Sam Altman the Antichrist? What is going on, and how did we get here? Polska, we're going to jump straight into this one. I briefly mentioned to you before the pod about this topic. Have you heard of this? Have you heard about the potential data breaches and the stealing of mass information and knowledge?
I'm actually blown away that I didn't even put this together before. I just assumed that it was all done, legally. But if you actually think about it, if you know what I mean? Because when you use AI, it didn't even cross my mind. Like, where is all this information coming from? Like, I understood that it was scraped from the internet, but I didn't think that was even illegal. Like, I didn't even realize that. I didn't even put a thought into it. I just thought, well, all the information is out there on the internet for, free use case. So yeah, they're just using that information. But when you started getting into it a little bit, and I don't want to give anything away because it's actually very interesting, I started realizing, holy shit, it's almost like a form of plagiarism in a way.
Big time. So we've seen talks about this plagiarism stuff, but it's pretty heated and it's pretty in depth. So yeah, like you mentioned, like you initially, if you're sort of naive to this, would think that all this information and knowledge is available free on the internet. But that's not the case. There is huge amounts of knowledge or information that's guarded behind paywalls, and rightfully so in a sense, right? To pay the creators and the people that spent their life trying to discover this stuff or develop these things. But it appears as if some of these large AI companies have actually illegally obtained a lot of the information or knowledge or tokens that they've trained their models on through some pretty deceptive practices. And this kind of stuff could explain, in theory, why OpenAI is no longer open in the sense that they were initially meant to be. And this has led to some pretty crazy conspiracy theories getting around on the internet, one of which I saw the other day, which is somebody or numerous people claiming that Sam Altman is the Antichrist, which is a pretty big claim. And I think it probably gives more credit to him than is deserving, so to speak, but it was interesting nonetheless. So for those of you who might not know what we're talking about, we're largely talking about a data set that appears to have been used by a few of the big AI companies called Books 3 or Library Genesis. And this is essentially like a large database of information or knowledge that was put together from various sources, but it includes sources of information that should be behind paywalls or were gated, so to speak. So there's obviously two ways to look at this. You can look at this from all information and knowledge should be free and accessible for everybody. I tend to lead a little bit closer to that side. Or it should be behind paywalls and gated so that the people that put it together can make money from it. But this typically does not. So when there are paywalls for these things, it's not typically the author who benefits the most. It's the middleman, or these in scientific publishing, it's the publishers or the journals that sort of make the most money. And there's many arguments that can be made from this. There's an amazing story about a young gentleman called Aaron Swartz, who was a genius who essentially hacked into a bunch of these large databases and pulled a bunch of papers and knowledge and information and put it together in a database. He was then prosecuted, and he apparently or allegedly committed suicide, but it looks as if maybe there was something deeper going on there. Anyway, Aaron Swartz, very sad story, very interesting. If you're interested, check it out. You just had a screen up. Let's quickly look at that, because I think one of those was the tweets.
Oh, was it really? I just typed in Sam Altman Antichrist in Google, and I just brought up an image. So I just wanted to make one point, dude. When I was studying in university, and maybe it was the same for you, I remember a lot of professors were always going on about open source information, like in the realm of science, right? Like science articles, nutrition articles, exercise articles. We were always talking about how it would be much better if it was all free source, because we want to share the information with the world. We want to try and, if we really want to make the world a better place, we would just open source all articles and not put a paywall, because some of these articles, bro, would be like $30 fucking. You know what I mean? For one article.
That's cheap. Some of them are so much more expensive now.
Yeah. So So that was always the thing where a lot of the profs were always like telling us that things should be open source. So it's weird because should AI have access to all science, do you think? Like what do you think is, what's the word? Ethical. Like would it be more ethical to allow OpenAI to have open source to all science? And is that fair to the people who are, taking years of studying the science and hours of work publishing the science? It's an interesting debate, right? Like in terms of what is fair and what's ethical.
It would be fair if the AIs that were trained on that information were open source or available to the people, right? The problem here is that obviously the OpenAI started as trying to be open and open source and wanted to do all of this for the people, but then they quickly shifted to being closed. Now, again, there's a bunch of conspiracies or theories as to why they've had to do that. Again, I think it could be largely attributed to maybe they trained on illegal data. Maybe they trained on things that they shouldn't have trained on, that they should otherwise have paid for, or they obtained through indirect measures that were not necessarily legal in a sense. So that could explain partially why they've had to close it off, because they don't want people to know that they used this either copyrighted or prohibited data to train their model on. So the question you ask is, should all this information be freely available? Well, in a sense, yes. There are some cases that you can make for no, but broadly, yeah. And if people had access to these models that were trained, if the models were a public good, then yeah, I think the argument can be made that they should be able to be trained on all of this information, provided that they're a public good, because what it's doing is it's providing a way for people to interact with that information and that knowledge through natural language, which is immense. And on top of that, machine learning, or AI as people are calling this, is fantastic at pattern recognition. It's fantastic at identifying patterns that we as humans might not have otherwise realized or haven't realized yet. And so it's essentially statistics on large scale data, and it finds patterns and correlations that we sometimes miss. We've seen that with natural language, right? Like there's obviously some regularities and patterns to natural language that we missed. We missed it, but by what these models have done and the way that we're able to use them now, we can see that, there really is these patterns that were just not obvious to us, but are obvious to a large machine learning or AI system.
Welcome to Good Meals. I'm Reuben. I'm the founder and developer of Good Meals, and I'm here to introduce you to a smarter way to approach your diet. Forget the one-size-fits-all meal plans. Good Meals is about precision, personalization, and simplicity. It's not just a meal planner, it's a tool that adapts to you. Start by telling us about yourself. Your goals are unique, so should be your meal plan. Good Meals utilizes advanced AI to tailor every meal to your specific nutritional needs. Here's where it gets interesting. Our extensive database isn't just a collection of recipes, it's a culinary exploration. Whether you have specific dietary preferences or just what's available in your fridge, Good Meals finds the perfect recipe for you. And it's not just about variety. We focus on the nutritional value, ensuring that every bite takes you closer to your health goals. Join Good Meals today at goodmeals.health. It's not just about eating better, it's about revolutionizing the way you think about food. Because at Good Meals, every meal is a step towards a healthier, happier you.
So yeah, this is the post guy, Simp for Satoshi. So this guy actually is pretty interesting. He has a startup building a hardware device for running machine learning models locally. But anyway, he made this post, and I'll just quickly read it for people that are listening. This tweet will cost me followers, make people think I'm a religious nut job, and likely blacklist me from being funded by some VCs, but it's important. Sam Altman is probably the Antichrist, and that it has a GPT-generated image of Sam Altman and a whole bunch of demonic sort of things around him. An interesting look he has on his face. Okay, so scroll down and we'll continue. 1, he's setting up a totalitarian system and knows how to play the charisma card, WorldCoin, an iris scan for some useless token. UBI, Universal Basic Income, via the World app. And we're not even allowed to talk about the technology the orb is built off to make sure it isn't nefariously storing data. And then he's accompanied that with a screenshot of a Bible verse, Revelation 13:16-18, 21st century King James Version. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark, their right hand or their foreheads. A mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Branding, people.
Yeah. The way my ex interpreted this was when we had a discussion about how the future they might be implementing chips into humans to sort of, track where they're going, what they're doing, store all their information on there, their credit or their bank information, all that. And she actually brought up, she was quite religious, and she brought up this verse in the Bible. She said that this is the Bible speaking of that. It's like Antichrist, like putting the mark chip into the people in terms of enslaving them. Yeah.
So his second follow-up tweet is, he did a bait and switch with OpenAI. Nobody's asking for GPT-4 weights, but he used OSS research, transformers or open source research, to get this far and won't even contribute back with the knowledge. He says it's for safety, but where have we heard that before? Oh yeah, financial regulation after, and then to show more, financial regulation after 9/11, forced vaccinations during COVID, etc. And then he's linked a screenshot of the Attention is All You Need paper that led to the Transformers and GPTs and the success of OpenAI. So down, okay, so he has no ownership of OpenAI and does it because he loves it. This is self-explanatory. If this doesn't scream grift to you or set off alarm bells, I have a bridge to sell you. Okay, next one. Let's assume for a second that he's a good guy. He wants to build superintelligence to usher in utopia, and WorldCoin is good. What do I need to do if I'm a bad actor and want to enslave humanity? Be the government, nationalize OpenAI and WorldCoin, and then enslave humanity. And he's attached a screenshot of 1984. Okay, if you're at OpenAI and are a first principles thinker, none of this will seem outlandish. If you understand the power of silicon intelligence, you owe it to your children to build a brighter future for them. This will drive you longer and harder than OpenAI's compensation. If all this is hubris and drivel, consider this last question. When in history has a dictator with power given it up? How many have promised utopia to get you to follow? And then he's included a bunch of notable communist figures. Lastly, instead of N companies controlling all the data in compute, Altman has made it N+1. OpenAI's initial mission has already failed. Their more nefarious pivot is what's playing out now. So he's attached a screenshot of a quote from Vishal Sikka, the former CEO, or not a quote, just an excerpt. Vishal Sikka, the former CEO of Infosys, stated that an openness where the endeavor would produce results generally in the greater interest of humanity was a fundamental requirement for his support, and that OpenAI aligns very nicely with our long-held values and their endeavor to do purposeful work. Cade Metz of Wired suggests that corporations such as Amazon may be motivated by a desire to use open source software and data to level the playing field against corporations such as Google and Facebook, which own enormous supplies of proprietary data. Altman states that Y Combinator companies will share their data with OpenAI. That's the end of the thread. So yeah, that was the thread that popped up on my timeline, and I had a chuckle to myself. Do I think it's true? No, but it's interesting nonetheless. So it's a good little segue into this whole idea of data and knowledge and information that is available, or at least out there in the world. And is it ethical or is it right to train on these things that are copyrighted, where there should be royalties paid to people who produce this content? And that's essentially what we're getting into here with the library Genesis and books 3, books 2, and books 1. So there is said to be copyright or restricted data or information or knowledge in some of these data sets that have been used by these large machine learning or AI companies to train their models. So one way to think about it, I'm pretty sure this is like a Beth Jesus quote or something, but fellow Canadian, by the way, guy, he said essentially OpenAI stole the internet and sells it back to you for $20 a month.
That's what they do. And legally, it is illegal to basically steal information and then sell it. It's the same thing that happens on YouTube. There's a way around it though. Like, I'll give you an example. There's a lot of channels that are dedicated to talking about podcasts. So they'll just like break down other podcasts and they'll show clips of that podcast, right? So they'll take a clip right from a Joe Rogan podcast and then they'll play like a 2 or sometimes 3 minute clip of that podcast. And if Joe Rogan or like his team, they don't file some sort of I don't remember what it's called.
Copyright claim.
Something. Then it's usually all right because you're allowed to make content about other people's content as long as you're creating content out of it. If you just show clips and you're not making content from it, then that's not okay. But if you're doing some sort of satire or some sort of comedy or giving your take on it, then that's fine. But the original property owner of that property, so Joe Rogan, he could actually claim some of the monetization that you made from that video. He has rights to that monetization. So in this case, it'd be sort of the same thing, right? Like,
yeah, essentially,
so you could.
Yeah, that's
how I see it.
Yeah,
like from a legal standpoint.
Along those same lines. And so part of this comes out, right? Like just to segue into like sort of how we got to this is that in this books 3, apparently there are 196,000 books, including the works of popular authors like Stephen King, Margaret Atwood, and Zadie Smith. And the reason they can sort of infer this is because they can ask it questions about these books. And it gives back answers that would otherwise not be able to be given unless the model was, possibly or apparently trained on those exact texts, right? And so this is how they're kind of like, reverse engineering the fact that, okay, they had to have done something on here because otherwise how would the model know about this? Other people claim that, or, lots of people talk about the novels or these books online, so maybe you could have got it from there, etc. But some of it is quite detailed. Hence why people think that they've trained models on essentially illegal data. But again, none of this has been proven. These are all just hypotheses, but it does seem plausible, right? Like it does seem plausible that in order to get sufficient quantities of useful information, knowledge, that they might have to do some pretty sketchy stuff, right? And essentially that's like when you think about a great machine learning company or a great AI company that's trying to do these large language models, these large models, you just need immense amounts of data. And you need high quality data, and the highest quality data that we tend to have is things like books and textbooks, scientific papers, manuals, like high quality. A lot of the text on the internet is just random ramblings, like lots of things that aren't necessarily either factually correct or coherent in a sense. And so it does matter where you get this. And so, yeah, again, to be a really good AI machine learning company, you've also got to be an incredibly good and sneaky data scraping company, because buying all of that data is incredibly expensive and just blows out the margins, especially when you're spending, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars on training runs. You also then don't want to have to be spending hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars on data as well.
I have a question, bro.
Yeah.
You said that you weren't in agreement with the simp for Satoshi's post. What was it about it that you don't agree with exactly?
I think he's probably giving a lot more credence or credit to Sam Altman than is probably needed. Like, I don't think anybody's really the Antichrist. I think that's more of like a metaphorical kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I can understand where he's coming from. Like, and it's fun. It is definitely, I don't know, entertaining to draw those parallels. But I don't necessarily, like, I'm not, this is probably going to get us heaps of heat or, but like, I don't necessarily think Jesus was a real person, so to speak. Jesus was probably like the culmination of many different people, and they sort of extracted the best of each of those people and combined them together to create this meta person being Jesus. Like I feel the same way, like gods are these like ideal sorts of beings in certain dimensions, like if you take the 100 or the 10 best people in your local area, and you do that for every other area around the world, right? And then you compete those people against each other, and then you get the best person for the region, right? So you get your local area, then the next one's your region, the next one's your country. If you keep doing this, when you get to the top, the winner of that thing is like a god, right? Like they're the best of the best of the best of the best. They're like a Will Smith from Men in Black. They're like this distillation of the essence of whatever that is. And I think that's the case with like these sort of biblical stories. I don't necessarily think they were a person or one person. I think it's probably the culmination or the combination of many different people that create the essence of that thing. That kind of makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, that was well articulated, bro. So I think you're good though. I think you can say what you think, like what you believe Jesus to be, or what you believe some of the stories from the Bible to be. It's your interpretation. I think that's perfectly fine. Fuck people if they're going to get mad about it. It's a goddamn podcast. Chill the fuck out.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. I think, so I agree. It's a little bit, to say compare him to Antichrist is a little bit exaggerated, right? But it's for entertainment value. Yeah,
it's a great way to get clicks, dude.
Yeah. And that's
going to be our thumbnail.
That's what it's all about.
It's going to be our title.
All right. And drawing the parallels between him and Hitler. Who else was there? Stalin, maybe? I don't know. Who else was there? Do you remember who was there? The guys? Doesn't matter.
Hitler and Stalin.
Yeah. And there's another dude, Mussolini, maybe.
Okay.
To double check. I don't know. But so I guess his point. I guess what the point he's trying to make is this control of information, basically, right? That's like essentially what he's getting at. And Sam Altman's painting this picture of how OpenAI is going to solve all of these problems and create this sort of utopia. But behind it, it seems like it might just be another way to control people, and for Sam Altman to be the one controlling.
Yeah. Look, I'm skeptical of all these things largely because, he gives a great example of like how these things turn out in history. When someone proclaims to have the answer to everything, it typically ends pretty badly. And that's because like you can't have a utopia, and that's okay. Not everything can be like pure peace is also impossible in a sense, right? It is part of what keeps us and keeps us adapting and life interesting is the fact that there is uncertainty and that things aren't perfect. And that what's perfect for one person isn't perfect for another. It creates these sort of asymmetries and it keeps progress going, There's an interesting, this is like, I don't know, slight tangent, but there's an interesting thing about how children that have like, really good and safe, consistent sorts of childhoods don't go on to create like amazing things. Whereas like it's people that come from some, there is a surprisingly, it's surprising how often someone that's very, very successful comes from like a traumatic or troubled or, sort of less than ideal childhood. and how sometimes that shapes you and drives you to go out and achieve outsized things or do just crazy stuff. Like there's many examples of this kind of thing, but that's an interesting thing to think of as well. Like if you solve everyone's problems, well, then you kind of like solve their curiosity. You solve their need to go and do things in the world because it's already done, and this is kind of like boring. So again, I think the utopia is like a false narrative. And anyone that proclaims to sell you a utopia is likely nefarious in some sense, not necessarily even meaning to be, but it just ends up that way. But yeah, it's crazy because in order to train these large models, you need huge amounts of data and knowledge and information, or data, information, and knowledge, right? So essentially, there is a sense in which the internet has been stolen and is now being sold back to everybody. Is it in a more convenient form? Maybe. I get use out of AI and these large language models. I think that they are useful, right? So it might be a good trade, but with that comes great responsibility. And yeah, whether or not that's going to be handled well, we don't know. Only time will tell, so to speak.
It's funny because a lot of businesses are built on just simply organizing information in a way that they can sell to you to make it more convenient to access. I mean, if you look at the like any app, right? A lot of these apps are essentially stealing information from all of us in some sort of way, right? And then
selling it to someone
package
else.
Something. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like that's how like a lot of businesses work these days. So I think Sam, he just basically did the same thing, used a business model that's been working for the last many years, and he just did something,
At a huge scale.
Genius.
Massive scale.
At a huge scale, yeah.
Yeah.
And now he's in the midst of it, right? So he's not planning on being Antichrist, but like you could argue that what he's selling could be Antichrist-ish. I know it's a very exaggerated word, but I just find it funny.
Well, part of the reason why this is a thing at the moment is because he's now like, they've gone from OpenAI, they're doing everything open source. It's all for the people. We're doing this so that no one else goes and does it, and they are centralized and they control everything. We want this to be available for everyone to level the playing field so that everyone's got a chance, right? They've gone from that to now closed, right, where they don't share their weights, they don't share the model architectures, they don't share anything about these models. They just sell you access to it, right? And you can reverse engineer to a large extent their training data and their weights and a whole bunch of other stuff through some really cool methods where you can query the models and you can ask, you can infer what the weights would be, so to speak, or what the training data is. Anyway, I digress. So they've gone from that to closed, okay, and now he's added another layer on top of it where he's now going and pushing for regulatory capture. He's wanting regulation. So remember we did that episode about Bill Gurley and regulatory capture and how it only benefits the incumbents. Well, OpenAI has kind of become a bit of an incumbent in this regard, and now they're pushing for regulatory capture. Like they're pushing for regulation. They're begging to be regulated, so to speak, so that essentially no one else can do what they did and get to where they are. So he's, they're protecting themselves in a sense. I think so too. Yeah. I tend to have faith. Where there's a will, there's a way. And I think that there's a lot of will here.
Yeah. You mentioned something about Elon Musk and some moves that he had to do recently in order to protect Twitter in a way.
Yeah. So there's a whole bunch of stuff about this, but essentially Elon, when he acquired Twitter, he realized that like, some people, some businesses, some organizations, some governments, we don't know, like just, there was a large scale effort to just scrape the fuck out of Twitter, X as it is now known. Just bulk scraping happening. So they made a bunch of changes so that now you have to be logged in order to see posts from Twitter. Whereas before you could just, search a tweet, you'd be able to see a bunch of stuff about it. I think now they still show some of it, but you do still have to log in to be able to see stuff. And then he changed the way the API works and then pricing for that API. And there's restrictions on how much data can be extracted or called at any point in time.
Interesting. Do you remember this beef recently between Elon Musk and Sam Altman?
No, I
I have
don't think
something
I've seen
here.
that.
So the bromance turned beef culminated in a new lawsuit filed by Musk against Altman and OpenAI, accusing the company of jeopardizing its nonprofit mission via its partnership with Microsoft. So,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
I do. So this is
Yeah,
because
so
Elon Musk was one of the founders of OpenAI. Like he seeded the mission essentially and helped to recruit some of the key people. And then he got kicked off. So they kicked him out, even though he gave them a bunch of money to start this. And then, now they've gone closed source. So he was pissed.
Yeah, so I'm wondering what he thinks about what's happening, about what people are saying now about Sam Altman, or at least what that post is saying about Sam Altman, because Elon Musk wasn't very happy with it going
Well,
closed.
I would think that he
either.
most certainly is not a fan of the way that it's gone because it wasn't part of the initial mission. It kind of like literally has inverted itself so that they're the exact opposite of what they were claiming or proclaiming to be initially. And there's a bunch of leaked emails about this as well. Like there's a bunch of emails where they're like, yeah, no, we're going to play this open source stuff for a period so we can attract talent. But then like as soon as we get to sufficient scale or whatever, we're going to close it off. So there's a whole bunch of shady stuff. Hence why, like, there is the space for people to be making these claims about, the Antichrist and all this other stuff. Because it just, if you do look with a critical lens, there's a lot of weird shit that's going on. There's a lot of double speak. There's a lot of saying one thing but then doing another. And there's like one of my favorite sayings of all time is, don't listen to what people say, look at what they do. Right? So you don't listen to words that come out of people's mouths. Just look at their actions. Actions speak louder than words. And we see this all over the place, right? But yeah, so AI models, these amazing innovations that can be incredibly useful. They're definitely not artificial general intelligence, and they're not what most people make them out to be. But they are, large scale they're statistics across large scale data, looking at correlations between things, identifying patterns that we otherwise might have missed with our just human brains, can be incredibly useful. But the way that they're essentially the initial few might have been built could be on pretty shaky, uncertain, kind of nefarious, maybe illegal footings.
Not interesting.
Yeah. So for anyone that's interested in a more in-depth version of this, I'm just going to send it. We'll link the episode in the description. But this guy, he has a channel called Then and Now, does an amazing job. And the video title is How AI Was Stolen. Sorry, 1 second. It is,
worries.
How AI Was Stolen.
Just bring it back to stolen intelligence.
All right, stolen intelligence.
Yeah, it's How AI Was Stolen. The channel is Then and Now. It's 3 hours long. The guy has done a phenomenal job of articulating many different concepts. But he goes really into depth about the whole data scraping, the legality of it all, everything else. Highly recommend watching it. Really, really good job. High quality. Like this is obviously a labor of love for this person that put this video together. And he has a bunch of good stuff in there about intelligence as well. How intelligence isn't just this thing that exists in isolation. It exists everywhere. Whole bunch of cool stuff. But yeah, go check that out. It's a really good episode. If you have any questions or other spicy information, leave it in the comments. If there's anything we missed about Sam Altman potentially being the Antichrist or OpenAI stealing mass data, leave us a comment. Leave us some links. Let us know. Anything else, Guy?
No, that was good, Guy.
All right. Thank you very much for listening. Have a lovely rest of your morning, day, night, evening, whatever it is. Peace out.
All right. Love you, bro. Peace.
Love you too, Guy. Bye.
Not.